Hi friends, glad to be back today. Today I want to talk about the silent treatment, but more specifically, the silent treatment when we're dealing with children. We recently created a TikTok page and we began to put out videos about the silent treatment and the impact of the silent treatment with adults. And it was interesting how a lot of people were commenting back and saying that they actually were on the receiving end of the silent treatment throughout their childhood and how that impacted them. Some of them said that it triggers them now as an adult if somebody gives them the silent treatment. Others spoke about the fact that, well, they have a tendency of giving others the silent treatment because they lived through it. So in today's video, let's talk about the effect the silent treatment has on children. I know that some parents out there feel that the silent treatment is the best way of disciplining their child because it's not physical and it's not screaming and yelling, right? Some parents are practicing that because they think it's the best option, and others are practicing the silent treatment because when they were a child, they were exposed to that same type of behavior, right? And it's interesting though, when we talk about the silent treatment, even from the adult perspective, what the impact is on the adult receiving silent treatment in their family or in their marriage or relationships, think about if that affects you as an adult, what the effect would be on the child. And this is very interesting. I believe that when you think about the effect on a child, it can make a child feel very powerless and small, right? Even intimidated. And I know that when a child does something wrong, we're supposed to make them feel a little bit of guilt so they don't keep doing it. However, the silent treatment has an ability to kind of not focus on the guilt so much as the intimidation and the insignificance, right? Usually also a child, because they don't understand what's going on, will do something to try to get a reaction from the parent that's not talking to them. Doing something to basically stop the silence and stop what they feel is abandonment and disconnection. It's interesting because the silent treatment can affect a child emotionally just as much as verbal abuse can. And it makes them just feel unwanted, insignificant, and it feels like they don't have a say in the matter or are unable to speak how they feel. The similarities are interesting because when we look at the silent treatment, the way that an adult feels about the silent treatment and interprets it, just like a child does, both of them tend to lose their will, right? Letting other people kind of take the lead, even maybe stepping over boundaries or stepping over what they want in order to avoid being, well, ignored, right? But also rejection. Because one of the biggest rejections we can feel in life is when people go silent, right? When they put that wall up and they're not going to speak. Like I was saying earlier, when a child does something wrong, the best way to get a child to stop doing that and not to do it again is to feel guilty for their actions, right? But it's interesting how the silent treatment, like I was saying, doesn't seem to just create guilt, right? Instead, guilt kind of comes maybe last, but really the child begins to feel stuck. They feel insecure with the parent because the parent's not acting like a parent anymore or communicating. And in that insecurity, they get this fear, this worry about what's going to happen to them, right? Why won't mom or dad speak to me? Why won't they talk to me? What's wrong? And what happens? Okay, it leads to two options. We can either lead to anxiety, right, where the child feels super, super anxious and worried, or aggressive, right, where the child becomes very aggressive toward the parent to try to get them to just start talking to them. So we find ourselves dealing with anxiety or aggression, right? And so in the future, when the child doesn't want to deal with this anger anymore, especially if they come from the anxious camp, they're going to do whatever they can to make that parent happy, trying to offset the possibility of experiencing that silent treatment again. The silent treatment can break down the bond between a parent and a child, right? Because if the child doesn't feel safe to share with the parent, that bond begins to drift, right? And if a child doesn't feel comfortable by expressing themselves to their parent, who can they express themselves to? So what does this do ultimately? It lowers their self-esteem. It creates problems in their communication. It shuts them down. They begin to feel like they can't express themselves, and they start getting further and further from a healthy way of expression because they're scared of how that's going to impact their parents or how their parents are going to take it, right? So when you think about it, that increases avoidance, and it can increase avoidance behaviors, and that's because the child wants to avoid conflict, right? So let's not talk about anything. Perhaps they even feel like they're walking on eggshells because they don't want to bring up anything or rock the boat to cause that silent treatment to appear again. So ultimately, the silent treatment when done to a child can do one of two things, right? It can push the child away, cutting that bond, and that child living in that fear state and also not feeling as though they can trust their parent talking to them about their truth or their feelings. Or it can create a much different child where the child becomes super, super codependently attached and reliant to that parent, depending on their parents for everything and striving to make sure that they're constantly making them happy and constantly trying to go after perfection, right? And we see this in adults and we see this in ourselves, right? Many of you have become that adult striving for that perfection, striving to make everybody happy, striving to do the right thing always. And sometimes, if we're coming from that perspective as an adult, we might find partners who turn out to be dysfunctional or toxic or even abusive, and you find that you're trying to do the same thing that you were trying to do with your parent with that partner. So I hope this video has helped you because I think that it's eye-opening for us to understand how the silent treatment does impact the child and how ultimately the child is going to grow up to an adult. Some of them are us, some of them are you watching this video, and how that impacts you and how that triggers you and arguments that you might have with your spouse, or how you might find yourself avoiding, or how you might find yourself more attached or codependent in nature. So please share this video with your family and friends and anybody that you think really needs to hear this message. And if you have a comment that you would like to leave, I would love to read that comment and let me know, were you impacted as a child by the use of the silent treatment from a family member, and how did that impact you? Especially, how did that impact you now as an adult? Don't forget to live your true life.